Hello, viewers. Welcome to tonight's stream. That started pretty late. Just something I can't control, something to do with servers, but better late than ever. And tonight, you are tuning in to see a special intro. It is a short film by Philippe Grammaticopoulos. It's called The Bellies, and it was created in 2009. So it's somewhat old, I'm going to say, not really, but to give you guys a better idea of what to expect and what it's kind of about, what the style really is, there's a lot of history to it, and I think it's very interesting. It's something that I'm going to be talking about in the near future. It's another really interesting cultural movement. It's called Surrealism, and this is what you're going to be seeing. It's going to be a surrealist piece, surrealist animation. So just to give you guys a brief idea of what it is, again, I'm probably going to be going in a lot more detail at some point in the future. I'm going to have a stream dedicated just talking about this stuff, giving you guys more examples. So without further ado, let me show you guys some surrealism here. Now, the first few images you're going to see are going to be surrealism, and the images that follow, you guys will get a better idea. So surrealism is a culture movement in Europe in the aftermath of World War I, in which artists depicted unnerving, illogical scenes and developed techniques to allow the unconscious mind to express itself. A leader, André Breton, was explicit in his assertion that surrealism was above all a revolutionary movement. At the time, the movement was associated with political causes such as communism and anarchism. It was influenced by the Dada movement of the 1910s, and that's really interesting. It wasn't up until recently, when I watched this film, that I actually realized that Dada, which was referenced in Doom Patrol, if you guys are watching that series, it's a really fun, awesome series based on a comic book as well. And they do go into Dada, the sisterhood of Dada. They mentioned that in the series. I'm going to say it's towards the end, probably season 2 or 3, or it starts getting into it at season 2 and then goes fully into it at season 3. So yeah, they mentioned that, and at the time I was like, something strange that Doom Patrol explores, but it's actually based on a real movement. It's a movement, French movement, back in 1910s, as I was mentioning. So developed in the reaction to World War I, the Dada movement consisted of artists who rejected all logic, reason, and aestheticism of modern capitalist society, instead expressing nonsense, irrationality, and anti-bourgeois protest in their works. Dadaist artists expressed their discontent towards violence, war, and nationalism, and maintained their political affinities with radical left-wing and far-left politics. So just to give you guys that brief introduction to it, over here you are seeing more so, I'm going to say that's surrealism, but to give you guys a better idea of here's another piece that is surrealist, and it's kind of like a combination of something that you would probably see in a dream. There's a dream-like quality to it, but at the same time, it's based somewhat on reality. There's certain realistic elements as well, so it's a nice mix in between both. And as you can see, the pages are slowly transforming into being birds, which I think is pretty cool. It's a beautiful painting. Here, following, this would be art done by Dadaist artists. So to them, it was a mixture. There was collage. It was poetry as well as collage. It was sculpture. There was other forms of art as well. But as I mentioned, I'm not really going to get too much into it. I don't want to take time away from this short film. But it's still very unique. I absolutely love their combination. There's a lot of composition and color there. There are ideas behind it as well. As you can see at the top, it says Dada as a movement. But I think it's also kind of interesting how their political approach towards what was going on. And as you guys heard, they're expressing nonsense, irrationality, and anti-bourgeois sort of approach. This is something that you would find in far right politics now. So it's almost as if though it came in circle, right? At the time, that was the approach, and I think in some ways it influenced social culture, social interaction. People wanted to be on the in, right, of these like artistic movements, of the Dada movements. And because of their erratic behavior, because of their irrationality and nonsense almost, and this sort of like illogical, irrational sort of approach to things, now you find far right politics and they're doing the exact same thing. So it's almost like there's always a step behind. You know, they're joining the bandwagon a little bit too late. Like, this is way before, and now this is like their approach where they're just gaslighting everybody with nonsense, irrationality, just no logic in what they're saying and how they're behaving. They're absolutely crazy. But the difference is that their values lie or kind of correspond with their behavior. You know, it's crazy behavior. Whereas the Dadaist movement, they actually had morals. They actually had values. And as you hear, their values were towards left-wing politics. You know, the ideas that support multicultural interaction, support, socialist sort of endeavors. To just kind of generalize it, I'm going to say like just socialist ideas, things that favor people as opposed to favoring capitalism, which what you would have with these far rights. Anyways, so that's pretty much just kind of like an intro. So that way, when you guys are watching it, at least you have some sort of idea, and you could decipher things a little bit more. But anyways, without further ado, y'all, I'm gonna play this cool little short for you. So that was everybody. That was a little short film that I wanted to show you guys. And as you could see, it really did have. Well, I'm gonna say it had a lot of commentary there on capitalism. You know, that really was just pretty much about a capitalist. And if you notice at the beginning, everybody looks exactly the same, right? They're wearing the same clothes. They're uniformly eating, you know, exactly the same thing. And it just kind of represents that culture in a sense, like especially during that time, you know, with the idea of like how capitalism is and how it aligns also with fascism as well. You know, the idea that everything has to be organized and everybody has to be exactly the same and think and act the same to make sure that it all works out for this greater good that supposedly therefore. But It's showing this guy who's basically kind of like this soulless dolt, who's walking around, and exploiting things. As you could see, he gets to the factory and he sees all those snails that he was eating prior. And it could be like substituted for other things, what they're doing to actual animals as well. The fact that they're testing on animals. As you saw, like they were watching the scientist who looked exactly like them and acted and thought exactly like them. They were injecting this stuff, changing their DNA in order to make the snails a lot bigger in order to be able to eat more. So it's kind of very similar, that's what they're doing to animals as well. They're injecting them with all sorts of hormones and antibiotics, making them a lot bigger so that way they could produce more, again, with absolutely zero regard. And you saw how some of them were just like mocking the snail that was in this like tiny little box, and everybody was laughing about it. So once again, showing this like sociopathic sort of culture where they derive pleasure from the misery of others. And eventually, him having the all the luxury of life, you could see him standing there surrounded by the product of his making, and then eventually diving a little bit deeper into it and coming out the other side as the food for another capitalist, somebody who is a lot bigger, somebody who has a lot more money. And it's kind of like a metaphor for what happens, with some people who are jumping into it thinking that they're untouchable and they're these amazing things, only to become victims of somebody else who has the same exact principles, same exact values, by the nature of what this capitalist system produces. It produces people who behave that way. So if you're taught to think, act, and be a certain way, follow these certain ways, you're eventually going to become that, and then you're going to teach that to somebody else, and then somebody else is going to outdo you in that sort of behavior and that sort of acting and values and whatever else it is. So it becomes more and more toxic, basically. So somebody else is going to become even more toxic, and then the next generation is going to be even more toxic than that generation, because by the nature of those values, that's what they're perpetuating. They're basically saying nothing is more important than capital, nothing is more important than making money. Other people's concerns and miseries are either entertainment or none of our concern. We don't really care about any of that stuff. So because of that, that is what is being conditioned to people. It's going to produce more and more sociopathic people. So it was kind of interesting how he decided to get kind of curious, and you could look at that when he like stepped into that shell as a way of self-exploration. He dived into himself a little bit, and then started to realize his own behavior in a sense and how awful it is, right? He's seeing himself as the snail basically on the plate of some capitalist who's about to just make him his dinner, who's about to cut him open and then consume him. So he's like in horror, and he's trying to get away from that, obviously, and he's trying to put himself back into a place of sense of comfort, only to just, of course, being hounded by that capitalist and eaten. So it's just kind of like a play on all that stuff, I think. From my perspective, the way I saw it, that's just kind of what stood out to me about it. I think that's why I actually really liked it. And you could see even at the beginning when he is riding through, right? He's like the only one with this like really nice luxurious green car. Everybody else is walking around or on their bikes. So you could see that it really is about this like the character is this like overindulgent capitalist, the sociopathic capitalist who doesn't really care about anything. And yeah, it just kind of goes on to that science lab scenario where they're showing, all that DNA stuff, and all of them look the same over there as well. So it's an incredibly toxic culture, and that film, being part of the surrealist movement, being part of like the Dadaist movement, is kind of sticking true to their values there of just having to expose or just trying to, I guess, show certain elements about how toxic that culture is. Well, anyways, that was pretty much it, y'all. I'm going to be uploading it after this stream. Unfortunately, today is going to be a shorter one for figure drawing basics. But, of course, I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'm going to be doing more figure drawing basics at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to take a quick break, a 5-minute break, to prepare for the next stream, which is going to be coloring comics. I'm going to be coloring John Buscema's Conan the Barbarian. So make sure you stick around for that.